Terrific. Well, thank you all for being here. As Bill said, a very difficult subject. Our mission and action events, we try and lift up both challenges and opportunities in our community and help our fund holders see where there are opportunities to invest and make a difference. And boy, we sure have one here today. We'll walk through some really tough facts of the situation for vulnerable children in our community. So it's a bit of, fasten your seatbelts for that portion of the program, because it's really hard to think about kids whose adults in their life have not been able to protect them. But I guess I'd say I take heart in three things. First is the leadership we have in this community of adults who have stepped up to the plate, and we've got the best in the business here on the line and on the call today. And there are others across our community. We'll hear from Don Binnicker and Wayne Carson and Diane Davis, but we also have our good friends over at Alliance for Children. And just too many. Once you start to name the organizations, I'll be remiss. But to know that for these kids that don't have adults who have been able to protect them, that we have these agencies that are showing up and just really, swinging for the fences to make sure that they're safe, and helping us and helping our donors connect to them. So that gives me a lot of hope for the future, as does, and Bill, I think we can move to this next slide, the folks that are investing to make sure that these organizations have the resources that they need. These four you see here, pictures of the four you see here, and others listed, really angels that had set their sights on the fact that they knew that there would always be vulnerable children in our community, and they wanted to make sure that their estate supported them long into the future. So I just love that Hazel and Don and Barbara and Betty and others are able to fuel this work going forward. So we're sure grateful for them and for the funds that they provide to make the work happen. Last but not least, it's all of you being here on a afternoon. A lot of other things could be commanding your attention, but the fact that you're taking the time to learn about this issue and think about how you can help and support the work, whether that be financially or in other ways, we sure appreciate being a part of this community with you. So with that, I want to first thank Garrett for putting together this great program. He's the Associate Director for Community Impact at the Foundation. He's been with us for 5 years. And Garrett, we sure appreciate all of your good work. So I'll pass it over to you.
All right. Thanks, Rose. Appreciate it. And welcome, everyone. Thanks for being with us today. Just a couple housekeeping items. If you could keep yourself on mute during the call today, that would be helpful. If you have a question that comes up as we are going through the program, please feel free to put that in the chat box. Amy Radcliffe from our donor relations team is going to be monitoring the chat box, and she will be holding those questions for our Q&A portion at the end of the program, and we'll field those to our speakers. So with that, I'm pleased to introduce our amazing panel that we have. We've got some great speakers here today that are doing some really important work in this space. So first off, we have Don Binnicker. Don Binnicker has a Master's of Science in Social Work from the University of Texas in Austin, and almost 19 years of experience working in child protective services in Tarrant and Travis counties. His roles in Travis County included supervising general investigations and specialized investigations for cases such as child fatalities, sexual abuse, severe physical injuries, school investigations, and high-profile cases. In his role at CPS in Tarrant County, he was the Program Director of Investigations and Family-Based Safety Services and collaborated with numerous child welfare agencies. He retired from CPS in 2016 and became the CEO of CASA of Tarrant County, which provides abused and neglected children with trained volunteer advocates who speak up for the children's best interest while they are in foster care. The CASA advocate assesses if the child's best interest would be to return home to their family, be placed with relatives, or adopted, and shares recommendations with local judges. And in 2021, 604 CASA volunteers gave over 51,000 hours of their time to help 300 plus kids leave foster care last year, in addition to all the other kids that they were serving. So really excited to have you on the call, Don. Thanks for being with us today. Dr. Wayne Carson has more than 30 years of experience working with children and families. including the last 21 years as CEO of ACH Child and Family Services. With a focus on protecting children and preserving families, Wayne leads a team of more than 650 staff in multiple counties who served more than 21,000 clients last year. In 2014, Wayne successfully positioned ACH as the state's first urban implementation partner of community-based care, which shifts the focus of foster care services from the state level to the local level, giving local communities flexibility and authority to make improvements to the system. In 2019, Governor Abbott appointed Wayne to the Health and Human Services Transition Legislative Oversight Committee to help the system become more effective in client service delivery. He holds a bachelor's degree in civil engineering from the University of Missouri-Rolla and master's and doctorate degrees in social work from UTA. ACH has 17 programs, including youth shelter, foster care, adoption, and residential treatment. And we are grateful for you being with us today, Wayne. Next, we have Diane Davis, and she is the director of the Focus for Mothers program at New Day Child and Family Services. She has been with New Day since 2017 and was appointed director of the Focus for Mothers program in 2019. This program provides classes and coaching to moms who are involved in the CPS system, helping them get back on track on their journeys to becoming the role models their children need. Diane has worked in the nonprofit sector for more than 43 years in a variety of roles, including grant writing, media directing, volunteer development, events, and serving on board of directors. She has also provided training to organizations on topics such as diversity, team building, and leadership, and is a volunteer mentor with Academy 4. In addition to the Focus for Mothers program, New Day Services provides chaplaincy services for kids and families in the court system, parenting classes for fathers, and other family supports to approximately 3,000 individuals per year. New Day's motto is helping parents be parents so kids can be kids. Love that. Diane, thanks for being with us today. So before we get into some of the data and stats and our panel discussion, I really just wanted to start off hearing from our speakers a little bit. So Don, Wayne, Diane, all of you are talented individuals. You have a lot of skills, you have a lot of experience. You could all probably be making more money in the for-profit sector. Why are you working in child welfare? What is compelling to you about this work? Don, maybe we can start with you.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. I can just tell you that, I spent almost 19 years with Child Protective Services. I started in Austin at CPS in 1991 and just kind of stepped my foot into that world. And I have loved being in that world ever since. I left for a period of time before I moved to Tarrant County, and I did some other stuff, and my heart was always there. I've been in an investigation role for almost the entire time, whether it's investigative directly or supervisor or program director. And I have been at the door. I have investigated these families. I have literally taken children out of their homes and placed them in foster care. And so I've seen probably the worst of the worst stuff that's happened to the children in our community. And, I see these kids and, they're not safe at home, and that's why they go into care. And when you put those kids into care, you ask if there are family or people that could take these kids so they don't have to come into care. But many times the parents won't give you that information because they're ashamed or embarrassed. So they come into the system and they're kind of stuck in the system and kind of labeled as there's nobody for these kids. We believe that's wrong. I believe there's always somebody for these kids. I have put kids in care, and years later, I've looked at that and thought about those kids and wondered, how did those lives turn out for those kids? When I came to CASA in 2016, I saw kids that are in the system that had been in the system 8 years. Those kids, one of those kids came in at the age of 3. He was 11 at the time I came into the system and came down here. That is not okay. Kids should not have to linger in foster care for 8 years or 5 years or 2 years. They shouldn't have to do that. So, we have a big focus on families, and families these kids belong to them. I believe our job is, let's try to get these kids out of this system. Let's try to do as much as we can to make sure they're getting while they're in it. So clearly there's a lot of passion there. We got some great folks we work with, and the collaboration in this community is awesome. That's why I do it. I'll keep doing it till they roll me out of here. So
Well, thank you, Don. What a amazing heart you have to do such challenging work for so long, especially on the investigations front, and now to be able to translate that skill into what you do at CASA. So thank you. Diane, let's go over to you. Why do you do this work?
Well, I've several years I've worked for a Head Start, and I would see the children coming in and parents struggling, and just getting connected into the community, and just really giving service was really important to me. And so as I volunteered in organizations, and actually and working in organizations, I saw the need for children, and families. And so that families that were struggling and really trying to make ends meet, trying to do the best that they can. And so as I got involved with it, it helped me just not only to understand what is going on in our community, but be a part of the solution. And so in helping to make that community better for all. And so I actually also volunteered for CASA was one of my things when I realized, wow, our services that we give, I really wanted to be a part of catching and working with the, they say catching the fish upstream before they come downstream. And so wanted to be a part of that prevention in our community to make a difference in the lives of children. And so working for New Day was just a perfect place to really stop this maltreatment of children. And so it's a part of a ministry for me that, that enriches my life and gives me that understanding and the needs of the community, and be a part of the solution, and just really connect me to people and the ideas that will positively impact their lives. So that's one reason I got involved.
Great. Well, thank you so much for being with us today. Wayne, we'll toss it over to you.
Garrett, both you and Rose have mentioned what a tough topic this is today. And the reason I do this is because we all get to see the other side of that equation and how amazing these kids can be if they get the right help at the right time. I was wearing my ACH shirt into a Target the other day and walked by one of those little optical shops in the Target, and this girl said, "Hey, do you work there?" And I said, "Yeah." And she said, "I went to your supervised independent living program. You guys helped me go to college, and I've got a job now, and I'm paying my bills." And so it is a tough topic, but there is a very hopeful solution to kids. We've learned a lot about how to heal trauma in kids. There are amazing people in this community that want to help. I had an amazingly great childhood, and just feel like every kid deserves that. And so getting to see the fruits of our labor is one of the advantages of having been around so long. And there really are some great opportunities for these kids if we can get them the right help at the right time, and they become resilient, appreciative, hardworking, amazing people.
Well, appreciate that perspective as we're about to look at some challenging statistics, to think that, there's a light at the end of the tunnel for these kids and these families when they get the help that they need. And that's what each of your agencies are providing. So excited to dive into this topic more with you all. Let's go ahead and pull up our next slide and just start with a little bit of an overview of the Child Protective Services system. Then we're going to look at some statistics and think a little bit locally about what the issue of child abuse and neglect looks like in our community. So what you see on this slide in front of you is a continuum from prevention over on the left side, which would be trying to stop abuse or neglect before it happens, all the way to the opposite end of the spectrum, which is when rights have been terminated and a child is either being adopted or is aging out of the foster care system. So everything in between there, family preservation, trying to keep a family together after an incident has occurred, removal, the process of actually having to take the child out and then put them in short or long-term placement, and then of course all of the aging out and adoption services. This is really the continuum of services we're looking at when we're talking about the Child Protective Services system. And a lot of the dollars that are invested in our community are on the 4 boxes on the right side after an incident has occurred. Only about 5% of DFPS's budget is spent on prevention funding. the majority of it is a reactionary system after something has occurred. So we're going to be talking a little bit about that today and some of the reasons for that. And all of the agencies that we're speaking to today are really doing a lot of work along this continuum. On the next slide, we know that 1 out of every 10 people under the age of 18 in the US lives in Texas. So we have a majority of the nation's youth here, and we've got a population who is at risk for abuse or neglect, and that has a significant impact on our community in multiple factors, from the education to the healthcare, social services system. We know that in 2021, there were 68,517 confirmed abuse or neglect cases in the state of Texas, and 45,870 children are in custody of DFPS in fiscal year 2021 as well. So talking about a pretty massive system here, lots of players, lots of money involved in this, and the lifetime estimated costs associated with confirmed child maltreatment, according to TexProtect, which is a child abuse prevention think tank agency here in DFW, $52.9 billion lifetime costs associated with this child abuse. So this is a huge economic impact for our state. It's a huge impact to the families in our communities, and a huge impact to the youth in our state as well. I'll turn it over to Wayne to talk about the child welfare in Texas stats when it comes to the breakdown of abuse. And we got a request in the chat if we could keep the slides larger for now. That would be really helpful, Bill, as we just walk through this part of the slide deck, if you could keep the slides big. Wayne, I'll turn it over to you for the next slide to talk about the percentages here.
Thank you. Carol just didn't want to see my face so big on the screen. So a couple of other, a little bit more detail on what Garrett's talking about with this world of child abuse and neglect that we live in. A couple of things that are important to understand is, one, of the kids who do enter the system. So these would be kids who the state has determined that abuse has happened to a child. So they are a confirmed victim of abuse. About 3 out of 4 kids are confirmed for what's called neglectful supervision. So a lot of times when people think of child abuse, they tend to think of sexual abuse or physical abuse, but neglectful supervision tends to be one of the big reasons that kids come into care. The reason that's important is, as we think about how do we get kids back home, what can we do to support families, what can we do to prevent kids from coming here in the first place, it's important to understand that. So what is neglectful supervision? Dawn could speak to this really clearly. Just in a nutshell, it would be children who are left alone. Mom goes out on a drug binge and leaves kids home alone over the weekend. Sometimes young children with no supervision, no food. Children don't have clean clothes. Children live in a filthy living environment. Situations where children are not being provided supervision and basic needs that are required for kids to be growing up in a safe environment. So it's still very traumatic for children. It can be very painful. It can be obviously detrimental, and important to understand that that's a big slice of the reasons that kids enter care. And then oh, go ahead.
Wayne, you made an interesting point when we were talking the other day that neglectful supervision can also be really hard to intervene in. If there's a physical abuser, they can be removed from the home. Sometimes neglect is just as hard or harder to treat.
Yeah, so there's some interesting data to show, what the treatment is. And sometimes if there is physical abuse or sexual abuse, there's a perpetrator that you can say, cannot be around the children, or there may be some anger management classes to help with physical abuse. Neglectful supervision can be tough because sometimes you get adults that just don't care or don't have the ability to have empathy for their kids, or to be involved, and addiction issues obviously play a huge part of that. So it can be, there can be challenges to helping families provide a safe environment to kids when there is neglectful supervision. And then the other piece is, that over half the kids we get are under the age of 5. Part of that is because it's harder for those kiddos to take care of themselves, so they are more likely to be removed, and the state's more likely to intervene. And but having said that, that still means 46% of the kids are older, and those kiddos can be more challenging to serve because of the mental health or behavioral health needs that they may bring into care with them. I think we can go to the next. Oh, so this is, my board finds this slide really helpful when they're new on the board, is just to understand a little bit about the system. Garrett kind of already went over this, but just to put some numbers to that, in 2021 in Tarrant County, the far left bullet is reported case. So a report would be if somebody in the community thinks a child is unsafe. So if you see, a child who's wandering around the neighborhood and looks lost and has bruises on them, you can call the child abuse hotline, or you can call the police, and that would be considered a report of child abuse. So there were 22,000 reports of child abuse in Tarrant County last year. When a report is made, it's the state's job to investigate that report. So they will do some assessment of the information they have, and then they will often send a person out to look into that situation to see what's going on. And so there were, of those 22,000 reports, 11,000 of them were investigated. That means somebody who works for the state of Texas went out to check on this child, and they have 2 questions they need to answer. One is, has this child been abused? And if the answer to that is no, so go into the gold box. If the answer to that is no, this is not abuse. This is a concerning situation. This is, there's a problem here, but there are some very clear statutory definitions of child abuse that would need to be met if a case of abuse is going to be confirmed. So if they say no, there has been no abuse, then they close the case. If they say yes, this child is a victim of abuse, then question number 2 is it safe to leave this child at home? Or can I find a safe place for this child? So can I tell mom, get your boyfriend out of the house? Can we find a safe adult in the family that can care for these children? Can I find a grandparent that a child can go live with temporarily until we figure out what's going on with mom? So if the child can be kept safe at home, then the state will work very hard to try and keep a child with their family or with a relative who can keep them safe. If the answer to that is no, that child cannot be safe at home, then a legal case is opened. There's a court gets involved, and the state of Texas has the legal authority to take those children away from their family temporarily to keep that child safe. So there were 409 removals in Tarrant County last year, and that's where we get involved through our community-based care initiative that Garrett talked about. So every child that's removed comes to our Community Our Kids, which is a division of ACH, and then it becomes our job to find a placement for that child. And then let's go to the next slide. And just this is a little bit of, so one of the advantages of doing community-based care is we have a lot of good data about what is going on in the system. And this is some data about some trends that we've seen recently. So these are confirmed cases of child abuse per 1,000 kids in the community. And so you can see the gold line on the bottom is the state of Texas. So since 2016, it's come up a little bit, and it's kind of been flat. The reason there's a big drop in between 2014 and 2016 is there was a policy change that redefined how abuse was, the legal definition of abuse. So there was kind of a dramatic drop in confirmed cases. But since 2016, you can see that Texas has gone up a little bit, and Tarrant County has continued to have an upward trend in the number of kids that are confirmed victims of abuse.
And Wayne, do you have any thoughts on why that is?
Why Tarrant County is increasing? Yeah, I think, there are kids that are being abused in the community, and we're pretty good at finding them. I think Tarrant County tends to have a little bit higher number of kids per thousand that are confirmed victims than other parts of the state. We're significantly higher than Houston. And I do think that is because we have such an active community. We really have a community here that keeps that wants to be responsive to kids, that are we have some really good judges that are willing to get involved if they need to. So I think part of it is the compassion that this community has to make sure our kids are okay, leads us to confirming more kids than other communities might. But we don't want to discount it. We've got a part of Tarrant County that has a very high infant mortality rate. We have 35% of our kids that live in households that don't have sustainable income to support all of their bills and their living expenses. So we do have challenges in this community. I say all the time, Tarrant County is a great place to live and it's a great place to raise kids, but we had 6,500 kids last year that were confirmed victims of child abuse. So there are challenges in this community related to keeping kids safe. One other add to this that's not on this chart, but one of the things that's been challenging, I think, for all three of the folks that are with you today is that on top of this chart where we're seeing some uptick in abuse and in Tarrant County and relatively flat in the state, we're seeing a pretty sharp downward trend in kids being removed. So that previous chart where if the answer to the question is yes, has this child been abused, then question 2 is the child safe at home? There has been a pretty sharp downward trend for the last almost 2 years now of kids that are removed from their families. And there's clearly some policy that is driving that. There's kind of an understanding, I think, in our state legislature that the state of Texas is not a good parent of kids. And so we want to do everything we can to keep kids at home. But the result, the next slide kind of talks about how that has impacted the overall system. So we have fewer kids being removed. We have more victims of abuse. So just putting those two boxes together, that leads to the next two boxes. So that means we have more kids who have been abused that are staying home with their families. And then we have more children, and then of the children who are removed. So this is something we've seen pretty clearly is when the state does say, yes, we need to remove that child from the family because they're not safe at home, the kiddos that are coming into care, so the kiddos that need to be in a foster home or in a treatment program or who can't live at home, are coming in with more needs. Their behavioral needs are more, their mental health needs are more. And so it has created some challenges for the system that is caring for these children to make sure we are keeping up with being able to meet the greater needs of these kids that we have.
And Wayne, do you feel like COVID is a part of that at all as well?
COVID's been somewhat of a part of it. And then we also have some we have some state issues going on related to how those folks who take care of kids are being regulated and monitored and paid that have created some capacity challenges too. And then one other just comment, I don't want to do all the talking, but on that green box of more kids staying at home with their families, the question to ask there is that good or is that bad? So if we have more kids staying with their families, is that okay or is that bad? And really, the answer to that, in my opinion, is it depends. Because we do know that taking kids away from their families can be traumatic and it can be difficult and it can cause additional challenges for that child and that family. So it could be a good thing if kids are staying at home, but only if we're providing a lot more services to those families. So we certainly know we have a child who needs help, we have a family that needs help. So what can we do to get services into those homes and help those families. It's a bad thing leaving those kids at home if we don't do anything. If we just say, it's tough. There's an abuse victim, but we really aren't going to do anything about it until it gets worse. And so that's my opinion. Diane and Don may have different thoughts on that, but I think there's an opportunity here to look at how can we provide more support for families. But if we don't, we're going to leave kids in situations where things could get worse.
Well, that is actually a perfect segue into the next part of our conversation, which is our panel discussion. So Bill, if you want to take the slides down for now, that's great. Diane, I'd love to...
One note, I think there was a question that was there from Ken about whether the maltreatment changes with age, the type of maltreatment.
Boy, that is a good question. I don't know the answer to that. I could get that answer because we've got the data to answer that. I can't speak statistically to that. So
I would say just from my experience in investigations, you see different stuff with the different age children. Children 5 and under, they're totally dependent on their caregivers. When you get to be 13, 14, 15, all of a sudden you kind of get a mind of your own. You start talking back. You have different stuff that happens. You get kids that are more resistant. You get kids that don't like living in a situation where there's domestic violence going on. Those kids can literally walk out of the house and go do something to protect themselves. 5 and under can't. And as you get to be 16 and 17, if you're still being removed at 16 and 17, there's some pretty serious stuff. And a lot of that is mental health stuff. Kids that are not being treated, things that they're not getting services for. So I believe it does vary by age. They're not all 100% the same. It's a mixture of above. So.
Sure. Thanks, Don. So Diane, I'd love to start with you, and you are working directly with moms who are in the CPS system who've been mandated to go to your parenting classes. And I guess, first of all, if you could tell us what Focus Plus is, and then I'd love to hear a little bit about the moms that come into your class. What are they dealing with? What are the situations that have led them to be in a situation where they have potentially perpetrated abuse or neglect? And what kind of things are they dealing with?
Oh, okay. Thank you so much. Well, New Day's Focus Plus programs are designed to just help parents to become fully engaged in their children's lives. And so for Focus Mothers, Focus Plus Mothers, it's about building that key protective factors that enable children to thrive. And so parents that come to us are either referred by the child welfare courts or child protective services, or the criminal courts, child support courts, domestic violence court, and prostitution court. And so what our moms are struggling with, you talked a lot about it already. Domestic violence it's that's probably like 80% of our parents. And the moms that are struggling and staying with that perpetrator or the person, that abuser, in addition to homelessness, just those insecurity of housing and food, and just that lack of self-sufficiency, and we have seen that because of COVID, our cases have increased. I'm assuming because of the isolation that occurred. And so, and it seems like not only have they increased, but the cases are more severe. We're seeing a lot of children hurt, deaths, more deaths in our children. And so these are just challenges that our moms are facing, and several of them are, they just don't know what to do in their situation. They feel like they don't have a safe place to go to without having their children removed, and so they end up staying in that environment. They're dealing a lot with depression, mental illness, that have been affecting the parents so quite a bit.
Thank you for that, Diane. And Don, when a kid gets into the foster care system and they get on your list to get a CASA volunteer, what is that kid bringing with them into that foster care environment? What is that CASA advocate having to address or maybe help advocate for that child on their behalf for? What kind of things are you seeing?
Okay, well, the kids coming into the system, first off, they've been, traumatized by abuse or neglect in their home. And then when CPS investigator comes in and takes them out of that home, if they are not placed with a family member, that's trauma again. So you've traumatized that child a second time. You take them to a home and literally you take them to a home. Sometimes it's in the middle of the night to somebody they don't know, they've never seen. They don't take anything they own with them. They have no pets, no friends. They don't go to the same school. The next day they get enrolled in the school they've never been to. They don't know what's going to happen. That kid is not sitting in class paying attention and doing schoolwork because they don't know what's going to happen when they leave school that night or where they're going. So there are so many things these kids are going through, and they're having to deal with those things. And then you put them in an environment, a foster home or kinship caregiver that they don't know anything about. They may not even speak the same language. You may have Spanish speaking kids and the family that's keeping them doesn't speak Spanish. So there's so many things that come into care. So they have very specialized needs. They may have mental health needs. They may have witnessed domestic violence. They may have been subjected to drug abuse and neglect. From that respect, there's so many things. The poverty issues, those kids come in with a load of stuff, and it's our job as CASAs to go in there and first off, figure out kind of what's going on with this kid. Try to figure out what kind of trauma have they had to deal with. And our role as an advocate is to support the system in a way that we are looking to see. One is CPS doing what they're supposed to be doing. Are they getting the care they need in the foster home? Or is their caseworker doing the things they need to do to make sure this child is getting services? Have they talked to other family members to try to get them out of the system? Are they getting what they need in school? We're advocating in regard to educational stuff that's going on with them. What about mental health needs and medical needs? So we are kind of looking at a global perspective. We are the only non-paid person. Our CASA volunteers are the only non-paid person that comes to the table for these kids. The kids get an attorney. The parents get an attorney. Sometimes each parent has a different attorney because they've got different roles and issues. One might have been the abuser. One is the non-protector. So they have different things. State of Texas has an attorney. So there's a bunch of attorneys that are assigned to these kids that don't really have the time to go sit and talk to these kids and find out what's going on and get an update of their status. So our volunteers will go into the home. They'll go into the foster homes and literally talk to the kids to find out, one, do you feel safe? Do you feel safe in this home? And figure out, are they actually safe? Because there's a difference in felt safety and actual safety. They may be getting everything they need, but they don't feel safe. So we want to kind of address that. Are they getting them to school? Are they going to parent-child visits? Are you placed with your siblings? Are you getting to visit with your siblings? So there's so many things that their caseworkers don't have time to deal with because the caseworkers may have 12, 15, 20 plus more cases, where a volunteer is usually assigned to one case. And they can kind of specialize on that one child of that one sibling group. And we've had sibling groups come in, and I know Wayne can speak to this, that a lot of kids come in, they're single kids that are brought in the system. We've had kids, sibling groups as big as 9. And you can't just put one volunteer on a case that's got 9 kids because they're probably in 3 or 4 different placements. So we may assign 2 or 3 volunteers. And those volunteers will work together, make sure the kids are getting what they need. And then we go into court. We prepare a court report for that judge just to say, here's what we observed with Don. Here's what we observed with Mary. Here's what Sally's got. This is what's going on with them. And we kind of talk about each kid individually. Here's what their needs are. Here's what they're getting. And here's our recommendation. We spend a tremendous amount of time going and talking to family, trying to find out if there's somebody that can take these kids and get them out of foster care. We believe, and I believe when I came over from CPS, that children belong to their parents. They belong to their family. They belong to mom and dad, aunts and uncles, grandparents. Kids do best and thrive when they're with their family. They don't when they're in foster care. It's not a natural thing for them. It's not supposed to be. State of Texas is not a good parent, never has been, never will be. but there are just some kids that cannot go home to their parents. So, we look and try to find other people that might be a long-term caregiver, or maybe even get permanent managing conservatorship of these kids, or even adopt these kids. So, but we look at family first, and we've been very successful. I know here in Tarrant County, about 94% of the kids in Tarrant County achieved permanency if they had a CASA. That means they either went home to their family, were reunited with their family, were either placed with a family member in a kinship caregiver situation, or they may have been adopted. And so we are working towards that, trying to get these kids that have been there forever, trying to get them out. We look at the beginning of the case. We try to advocate at the very beginning of the case. Let's see if we can't get family members involved at the beginning. And I know CASA has worked collaboratively with ACH, LCOK, trying to meet together and do this as a dual team thing. So we're looking for these kids, same kids, we're dealing with the same kids, but we're doing it from two different angles. They have their responsibilities, and we're trying to work to see, are they looking at family? And sometimes we're going back and we're finding family that was involved 5 and 6 and 7 years ago, but they couldn't be a placement consideration then, but today their lives have changed and they could be. So we're exploring those options, and we work very collaborative with OCOK to do that. And it's great. We can pick up the phone. I can say, hey, Wayne, let's go eat breakfast or lunch or whatever, and we'll meet and we'll talk about our issues. And he can pick up the phone and call me, and there's just a lot of collaboration going on. So
Like, collaboration is so important, and we've heard some reports in the news about high turnovers continuing at CPS, and so especially when you've got high volumes of caseload and high turnover, it's even more important to have an extra set of eyes on those kids. So Wayne, you at ACH and OCOK are managing foster care in our region. What happens when a kid gets removed from their home, and how do you decide where the best place for that kid is?
So when a child gets removed, we get called, and we have 4 hours to find a placement for the child, which is challenging because it could be a 3-month-old child who's healthy and doesn't have any medical needs and needs a safe and loving family. It could be a 16-year-old child with an IQ of 50 who has self-harm behavior. So we get a wide range of needs that children have when they come into care. So in order to be able to be responsive, it's our job to have a network of services available for kids. Some of those are provided by ACH, but we also contract with other providers to meet the needs of our kids as well. So we have about close to 50 other agencies that we have contracts with that we can utilize them to help meet the needs of kids. We also have a database where we can, and this was unique to community-based care. This did not exist in Texas before we started, but when a child comes into care, in order to make a good placement decision for that child, we have to know, one, what are the needs of this child, and two, what is the capacity of our provider network in order to, in other words, what's the best place for this child? And we have a database where we can identify the needs of the child, match those with our database, the providers that we have in our system, because they're in the database, and we have a matching system that can say, here are the 3 providers that would be the best fit for these children. So the ability to align needs with services has been something that community-based care has been able to do in a pretty exciting way.
That's great. Well, thank you for all your hard work. I know that's been a long project and a lot of work to get it to where it is today. So thank you for all of your work to make that be better for our community. Going back to Diane. Diane, when you're teaching a Focus Plus class, or when your staff is, what are you teaching these parents? And what kind of skills are you equipping them with? How are you helping them change whatever dynamics are going on in their home, or overcome whatever domestic violence situation they're in?
Okay, well, we take a holistic approach in working with our parents and strengthening our parents with skills that will prevent that dysfunctional parenting and prevent the child maltreatment and emotional behavioral and also educating them on the developmental needs of a child. And so our program Focus Plus is a cognitive behavioral programs that we focus on just modifying those antisocial thinking and promoting that self-responsibility. And so each week lesson builds on the prior week. And so our program is highly relational. And so as we start off, really helping that parent to understand what is happening in their life in this journey that now that they're in child protective services. And how to use that power of positive influence. And so, and really letting them know this is what you have control over. It's really your attitudes in action. And so, and then how you use that it's going to benefit you in this process. And so, we start off by just uncovering, helping that client to just understand how did she get to this point or how did he get to this point, and understanding their family of origin and just and making priorities, because sometimes maybe they didn't prioritize the needs of their children. And so letting them know just like how important that is. And since domestic violence has been such a huge issue, helping them understand those extreme risk factors, helping them to understand ACEs, how, what impact it had on their lives, in addition to their children's life and what they're going through. And so, as I said earlier, we do take that approach and just uncovering what happened in that client's life, building that, especially if we're talking about a woman, that mother, because she comes to us feeling broken, feeling like, wow, I must, I'm not valued. People are thinking that I'm a bad mom. And so we help her to understand that, you're here, so we can help you be that effective mom. It's not that you're a bad mom, but helping you to be more effective. And so we start building up that mother's self-esteem, and I'm helping her to understand her own value, helping her to set appropriate boundaries, and having that mindful awareness, because I will tell you, we get them, they're angry because they have to come to us in the first place. And so having that mindful awareness and how to regulate their emotional state, which sometimes for some it's really difficult for some. And so, but once they really understand that we're there to help them, to empower them, and so then they can understand, wow, this is the effect of trauma had on my life, and what it's going to have on my child's life, because a lot of the moms they've been having that poly victimization. And so it's not just when they were a child, but now as an adult, they're still going through that abuse. They're still having that trauma that is affecting their life. And so, which is why we take that holistic approach. And so we know if we're helping that parent be the best that they can be, their children are going to be okay. And so they can build that, start building on building a strong child, and helping them understand that, what, you are not raising a child, you're raising a future adult. Because if they keep that same mindset, they're just dealing with the great needs, the temper tantrums. But let's start helping your child, building those healthy qualities that you want in your children. And guess what? Your caseworker wants the same thing that you want for your child. And so once they get that understanding, they start understanding how to go about and developing their child and using the appropriate responses to their children, especially to their children's behavior at those various ages. Because what happens is that they think of discipline as punishment. But once we help them to understand, no, discipline is teaching, being that role model, being that example for your children. And so, and so we talk about what kind of legacy you want to give to your children. what does that look like? And then we're helping them to build that roadmap and actually implement that in their lives and those strategies. And so we also work with them on budgeting. And then it's so important that they don't go back to what got them there in the first place. We talk about that relapse prevention, whether that was a toxic relationship, domestic violence, not, that poor self-care, maybe it was drugs, whatever that is. And during this process, where we get that Focus Plus is because we also talk about how to navigate the system of Child Protective Services. And so we have 5 packets that we go through working with that client. And so not only does our facilitators give that instruction, but they do wellness check-ins with our parents to just say, how are you doing in your cases? What's going on? How are you working in your services? And whether it's jobs, whatever that is needed. And with those wellness check-in, it allows our mentor navigators to also walk beside them as well. And so our mentor navigators, they come in and saying, what resources, and connecting them to resources that maybe they were afraid to even engage in, because they thought, if I ask for this resource, they're going to realize that something's going on in my life, that something's happening in my life that it's not good for me or my children. And so they're not going to even access that. But when that mentor navigator really, says, builds that trusting relationship with them, they understand that it's a safe place, and so to reach out to those community resources that are available, that has always been available to them, but because of the fear of Child Protective Services coming in and they feel like, taking their children away. That's why a lot of our moms struggle in staying in those toxic relationships, because they thought, if they realize that domestic violence is happening in my home, they're just going to come and just remove my children, because I've seen it, a couple of doors down. I've seen it with my cousin. I've seen it with other people that I'm acquainted with, that their children were removed. And so this process with the mentor navigation is that they get to help that mom, help that dad, walk through them with this entire journey, going to court with them, how to prepare for court, and then what reunification looks like and what is needed for that reunification. And so, and so we do this in the classroom. We also do it virtually, but what's really important that we're outside, with that client, not just in the classroom. We're checking and realizing that we are there with them.
So in addition to all the skills that you're giving them, you're really giving them that mentor navigator to walk alongside them outside of the class and help them get connected to the resources that they need, make sure that they're implementing the things that they're learning in the class, or troubleshooting with them with questions they're having in real time. So that's a really core component of your class. And one of the needs that we are lifting up for New Day today is that you have some funding for your current mentor navigator that is actually about to expire, and that funding source is not renewable. So could you speak a little bit about the funding need that you have to continue that position?
Yes, as I said, we have seen that mothers that have mentor navigation services, they are, we have like 85% of them will get their child returned to them, and really stay on that road of success. We have that mentor navigation. Mentor navigator will also not only have walk with them while they're in class, but even after class. And so we have seen that when that mentor navigator is walking alongside them, they're strengthened, they believe in themselves, they have hope, they have that desire, and not that, they didn't before, but they just didn't know how. And so it's important that, the moms have this a person that's there, that's helped them to, eat that huge elephant that they're facing, to take one bite at a time, and to increase their social and emotional and economic support, to get them in housing, to improve their, just their personal well-being, that self-care, that stress management. There's times when I hear the conversation going on with the mentor navigator, and she's, maybe that mom is just going through stress, but that stress is, has developed into so much more, gets into depression.
Sure.
And when they have someone they can call on, it encourages and strengthens them. So.
Sure. Well, that is such an important piece of your program, and it sounds like it's making a huge difference. In these mission and action calls, we like to not just talk about the problem, but also offer up a solution of how we in philanthropy can help continue to move the needle on this issue. So your development director, Betsy, had shared some numbers with me that $40,000 is the remaining gap to fully fund that mentor navigator position. And we'll have a slide recapping all of this at the end. But just for us to be aware of as we think about our own giving and our own foundations that we might represent, if you're here with a private foundation, how we can continue to support New Day in their work with that. So thank you, Diane. Don, I want to turn over to you, and your team has shared a really compelling statistic with us. 80% of Tarrant County children with a CASA went home to a relative. 55% of Tarrant County children who did not have a CASA went home to their relative. So there's a huge gap in who gets to go home, who has a better chance of going home with a relative if they've been put into foster care. So speak about the impact that your volunteers are having, and then what your need is for an additional caseworker.
I think the big part of that is, that we are looking strong at families, and if they can go home to mom and dad, that's the best case scenario, mom or dad or whatever their family situation was. But the biggest chunk of those kids are going home either to their biological parents or to their relatives, and through a kinship placement. That is a big, big deal. That keeps kids, that means they're not aging out of the system, they're not being adopted. So just having a CASA who is able to focus on that child and their life situation and their family situation allows us to look at them and say, hey, can we get them out and send them home? And we hope that's a great source for them. If they don't have a CASA, we don't even get to have those conversations. And, we probably have about 400 kids here in Tarrant County that do not have a CASA. We would love to be able to have CASAs for all those kids, but it's a journey. We're going to have to get there. It costs money to do that. So.
And you have 19 caseworkers right now. You want to get to 20, and talk to us about the numbers for a new caseworker.
Yes, that's correct. One casework supervisor is a paid staff position, and they can supervise anywhere from 25 to 35 volunteers. Each one of those volunteers can have one kid or a sibling group. Just depends on the volunteer and the particular circumstances and the needs. We don't want to overload our volunteers or our casework supervisors with too many, so we try not to max them out and give them 35 volunteers, because that's a lot. That's a lot of people to supervise and keep up with, and they're working on court reports and assessing the kids, and anything that the volunteer can't do, then the supervisor steps up to do that. So we try to keep the cases around 25 volunteers per paid supervisor each, and like I say, each one of those volunteers can handle anywhere from one. Depending on the sibling group, the average in Tarrant County is there's 1.6 kids per case. And some have more. We've got volunteers that have been here 20 years, and one is going to her 50th child that she has been working with. So wow. It's a long-term volunteer process. And it costs us about $55,000 for that one supervisor, salary and benefits that go along with that. So you can see the need there. That impacts probably close to 50 kids.
Awesome. And I know you're doing a lot of efforts on the recruitment front as well to bring new volunteers in, bring diverse volunteers in, so that when you get this new caseworker funded, you can have a pool of volunteers to get assigned to a CASA. So love to think it through with this group, how we can support you in that, and stay connected to that work. Wayne, you guys are doing some exciting things around kinship and helping grandparents or aunts and uncles or family members who have taken in a kid who maybe were not anticipating having to raise a kid or raise a kid again. So talk to us about what you're doing with that program, and some of the concrete supports that you are providing to those families that we might be able to help support as well.
So we recognized, what you've heard several times today, and that's the importance of children being with families. And we also saw that the percentage of kids in Tarrant County that were staying in a kinship placement was pretty low, and especially compared to other parts of the state. And we saw an opportunity to really improve that. So we've engaged about 2 years ago, we started a whole process to really look at how can we do better with kinship? How can we provide more support, get more kids back to a family member? We're seeing some amazing progress. We've gone from about 19% of our population living in a kinship home to we just hit 31% this week. So over about a 1.5 year period, that's pretty fantastic growth for the size of the network that we operate. So one of the things we're learning is that in order to make that happen, yes, we have to have people that are supporting these families. We have to kind of walk alongside them to help them navigate the system. If they're eligible to be over at New Day for services, we want to make sure they get over to New Day for services because they do such a great job with these families. If we can get them a CASA, we want to get a CASA worker assigned to them. So we have to have people working with them. But a critical piece is just we call them concrete services. But I signed a check this morning for $2,600 to fix a slab leak in the home of some grandparents that were raising their grandkids. And they had a water pipe leak. And so, that $2,600 is the difference between those children being able to stay with their grandparents or having to leave and go into foster care. I also signed another check for $250 this morning to help get some kids into childcare. They were staying with an aunt, and she is eligible for free childcare, but it's taking 2 weeks to get that eligibility approved. And we couldn't wait 2 weeks. So we're going to pay for that until those benefits kick in. So a pool of concrete services where we can meet the basic needs of these kids. If we can come in with a bag of groceries, if we can buy a car seat, if we can get school supplies, it helps these families. And symbolically, it shows these families that we're not just another social worker that's out here to look over their shoulder and tell them what they're doing wrong. We are really here to help them. And when you can back that up with something to give them or something that can help them today, it's a very, very powerful way to support kinship placements and to connect with those families in a way that they feel like you're working with them and not against them.
And I'm sure it takes a huge burden off of them in the midst of them having to potentially go to court over this kid, maybe pay legal fees, extra mouths to feed in the home on top of living life and other expenses they normally have. Those concrete supports are really, really useful. So you're looking to get a fund of about $40,000 to have as a reserve that you could draw down over the coming months for these types of crises that come up to be able to instantly write a check for that family.
Yes, yeah. With the holidays coming up, with winter coming, that'll give us some critical reserves to be able to respond to needs as they come up.
Great. Well, I want to thank all of our speakers. Before we get into Q&A, I did want to transition a little bit into a slightly different angle of this topic of child well-being and family health. So we know that with the recent Dobbs decision overturning Roe v. Wade, that we are going to have more kids in our community that we are going to need to serve. And I want to turn it over to Rose to talk about some important work that's happening in terms of thinking about how our community can support moms who are pregnant and infant health and address maternal mortality rates that Wayne mentioned earlier. And then we'll wrap up with Margaret kind of doing a recap of how we can help support these needs, and then we'll get into Q&A.
Great. Thank you, Garrett. And thank you, Wayne, Don, and Diane. Just really wonderful to hear about your work and the smart ways you're trying to help serve children. Just quickly to give some background on this is really sort of a parallel effort that's happening across our community. And it all started, actually, I happened to be sitting at lunch and I looked across the room and I saw Wayne Carson deep in conversation about a serious issue. And I thought, oh dear, maybe I should avoid Wayne's eye because he's coming up with he's hatching a great plan for, and he thinks big, and sure enough, he was thinking about the current state of how children are served in our community, and making sure that we actually provide better access to resources for most vulnerable families. And when we peeled back and looked at the issues around maternal mortality and infant mortality in that first year of life, recognizing that we have to do better in our community. So since that first conversation in late spring, fast forward, and with the mayor's leadership, we now have the CEOs of all the major hospitals around the table. And I think there might be a slide with the logos of the folks that are engaged in this. So here's the problem. We have the second highest maternal mortality rate among Black women in the state. Oftentimes the issues that are really most pronounced for this folks in a vulnerable situation are drug overdose, homicide, suicide are leading causes of pregnancy-related deaths, and depression in that first year of life being really a real battle for women in postpartum, and trying to make sure that they have the opportunity to get the help that they need. So as I said, next slide, we have these folks have all come around the table. And I've actually just was pretty stunned by the way that each one of these agency leaders stepped up and said, yes, we've got a problem. And yes, we've got to operate in a different way going forward. So we now have this group is all networked, and we have a project manager that will be helping for all these organizations to figure out how they can create basically a resource map of everything that's available here in Tarrant County, and then make sure we get that information into the hands of those that need it. So it's pretty powerful. Wayne, I want to thank you for your leadership to help get this work underway. But it's really going to be a new way of doing business for the agencies. And Wayne, did you want to add anything that I might have missed?
Just, I love that slide because you see all the big hospital systems there, and then you see some social service agencies. And when we look at what are the factors that contribute to health, so infant mortality and maternal mortality and mental health, depression and healing trauma, 30% of what contributes to that is our genetics. So, if you're genetically predisposed to be diabetic or to have heart conditions or to be depressed, then there's certainly a genetic component that contributes to that. But 70% of what contributes to that are what we call social determinants of health. And that is, do you live in an environment that is safe? Do you eat healthy food? Is your stress level manageable? Can you get to the doctor if you need to get to the doctor? Do you understand the instructions the doctor gives you if you go to the doctor? Do you speak the same language as your healthcare providers? And so I'm really excited about this because I think it's connecting those high quality medical services that we have with factors that can contribute to that other 70% of success. And that is affordable housing, good food, good childcare, good access to healthcare, somebody to check on you. I love Diane's description of just wrapping their arms around their clients and loving on them. Who's going to check on you when you're not able to get out of bed one day because you're so sad, and make sure that somebody's making some chicken soup for you or telling you that they care about you. So those things are very, very powerful factors that contribute to the overall health and mental well-being of our community. And I think, Rose, your vision to bring all of us to the table is very exciting.
Yeah, and I think everybody on the line wouldn't be surprised to see that this town, to see that the response, it's been really terrific. So more to come on that.
Well, thank you, Rose and Wayne, for your leadership on that. We're excited to see where that goes. I want to toss it over to Margaret Kramer, our Director of Donor Engagement, to talk about how you can support these agencies and how our team can be a resource for you, and then we'll get into Q&A.
Great, thank you, Garrett. Thank you again to all of our organizations for the great opportunities you presented to this group today. And thank you especially to all of you who joined us to learn more about the needs in this community and the good work that's being done and the solutions that we can all help bring others around the table. To that regard, we will be sending out a recording of this with a link. Feel free to share with family, peers, colleagues, anybody you think that would be interested in learning more or supporting these initiatives. We have a great donor relations team with Vicki and Amy and Jemima and myself, and we are here to serve you, answer questions, help you do research, help you learn more, and help you in making an impact with these organizations to support children in our community in general. Sophie, please feel free to contact us at any time. Like I said, we're here to serve you and to answer any questions, further questions. If we don't know the answer, we will find it for you and get you to the right person. Thanks, Garrett, again, for presenting this wonderful topic and these great organizations for this need in our community. Again, these three organizations in particular are looking for these needs to at ACH, Kinship Navigator Program needs, CASA, an additional caseworker to serve all those volunteers and children out in the community, and New Day for the mentor navigator staff position to walk alongside those women in moving forward in their journey. So thank you again for your time.
Thanks, Margaret. Amy, you've been monitoring our chat box, and do we have any questions for our speakers?
We do. We have a few that have come in. First up, Don or Wayne, if you can answer this one for us. We covered the percentage of cases that were reported in Tarrant County of child abuse. Do we have an idea of the number of cases that are not reported?
I can tell you, I have no clue. You know, that's a hard question to answer because, you know, everybody that's on this call and everybody in the community are required reporters. But, you know, it's not for you to investigate, just report it. And, you know, we don't know what's not being seen. And so, no, unfortunately, I don't think any of us can answer that.
Is that one of those things that keeps you up at night at all?
Fortunately for me, it doesn't keep me up because I'm not having to do the investigations, but I do think about it. And it's like, you know, we know the ones that are coming in, and there's some pretty serious stuff with the change in the definition of abuse. You know, they're adding a component to that called blatant disregard. That means, you know, something's going to cause a negative impact on a kid and you just did it anyway. You know, and trying to prove that up in a removal case to a judge, that's a hard piece to prove up, which means you may be leaving a kid in a bad situation if you can't prove that. So yes, we worry about those cases, and I know CPS investigators worry about that all the time. Is there something happening on a case I don't know about? And unfortunately, we can't control that part.
Yeah, just to add to that, the time I was losing sleep over that was during COVID, because those eyes and ears that are the safety net for our kids, our school systems, our daycare programs, our church groups, our youth sports, you know, all of those caring adults in our community that have contact with our kids, we're not seeing our kids. And so we really did lose an important safety net of protective eyes and ears when everything shut down. Now that things are back going again, I think we do have a community that tries hard to recognize, you know, what's going on, and if kids are going to school or if they're involved in the community, then chances are pretty good somebody's going to call it in.
Thank you for that. Diane, how often do your mentors and your mentor navigators meet with the families they're working with?
Well, it really varies. Sometimes some clients are calling the mentor navigator either every day, but their goal is to check in with them at least once or twice a week, you know, depending on what service plans they have given them. Some moms are, they may call sometimes several times a day just to check in and report to say, I've done X, Y, Z. And this is where I am, or, you know, they they're feeling stressed and they just need sometimes just their lid to be lowered, to be calmed. And so it just varies. What's really unique about our mentor navigation program, it's not one size fit all. It takes an individual approach and helping that parent, whatever they're working through.
Oh, thank you. That's wonderful to hear that they feel comfortable with their mentor to just pick up the phone and call when they need support. That's fantastic. We talk a lot about collaboration. And so, how do, we'll use the three of you guys since we've got you here today. How do y'all collaborate? And especially with our public schools, we can be a little specific there, but when it comes to these kids in and out of school and parents taking them to school and being involved in those parent-teacher conferences, how do y'all work together? Or do you have plans to work more together?
I'll go ahead and just jump in. What's one thing that we talk about with our team is heels on the ground, and just really reaching out and keeping in communication with our caseworkers, with our CASA workers. And it's really, and when we start working together as a team, because we know we're there for our children, and so to empower our parents. And so once we realize that it's so important to just talk to each other and keep those lines of communication open and understanding what each role is doing. So we set up our staff. It's always saying, hey, we'll come to your organization and speak. The caseworkers need to know a little bit more what we're talking about in classes, or the CASA workers. And so they're checking in and we're having that dialogue. So, because we're there for the children, we're there for our communities.
I'll go next, Don. So one of the things I love about this community-based care approach is that we no longer have people sitting in Austin making decisions about Fort Worth kids. That is what our community, our kids, is able to do. And so the way to do that is to make sure we are connected with the community. So Don and I have drank a couple of gallons of coffee over at Paris Coffee together, comparing notes. He hears things from his staff. I hear things from my staff. Our staff know that we talk. And so it's a really good way to say, yeah, I've said a million times since we started in 2014 that I can't address an issue if I don't know about it. And I really trust, I love having trusted relationships with people in the community that can tell me, hey, here's an idea, or here's something I don't think's going as well as it should, or here's something you need to know about, and for me to be able to say that as well. So, and then Diane, the New Day folks did a webinar for our permanency staff a couple of months ago. We have a monthly kind of community presentation of somebody that is serving kids in our community. The other thing New Day does really, really well is get dads involved with our kids. And so a program to connect fathers. And so we love working with them, and it's really important for our staff to know about their services. So, I think we are intentional about knowing what other people in the community are doing and nurturing those relationships and making sure that our staff are aware of the amazing services that are available to kids and families in this community.
And I would just say that, one of the things I like working with Wayne is, we meet for coffee or breakfast or whatever, and I bring a folder with me. And, when we talk about issues, you hear about, well, y'all never do this, or y'all never do this, or we don't want about y'all everything. We want specifics. And so I would bring him specific issues on specific cases. And I could hand that to him and say, here's some specific concerns. And I guarantee you, he got back from breakfast and he's already working on them, because that day we will hear responses about stuff that he's already gone to and talked to and worked out and worked on. So yeah, I think it's the collaboration that we have been so much able to do. We can pick up the phone and we're not afraid to talk to each other. We see each other at different leadership meetings and have for years. And I think that's it. Tarrant County has got the best collaboration, and I talk to Dallas folks all the time, Dallas CASA. They don't have that in Dallas County. Tarrant County has got great collaboration, and it takes all these services. We all work together. We all have our different roles, and And we want to know if there's things we have shortcomings on, please let us know. Because like Wayne said, if we don't know, we can't fix it. And, sometimes the people on the bottom rung of the ladder are afraid to say, going to their boss and say, I made a mistake. We have a big policy at my agency. It's like, you can make a mistake. That's okay. You're not going to get fired for a mistake. Let's talk about it. Let's fix it. Let's work on it. And, so we want to know from the ground up what's happening. And we do appreciate the conversations and the ability just to say, hey, we pick up there's all different kinds of leaders through their organization, and we can call at any level and know we're going to get some kind of response. So it is great. And we try to work that way. Not everybody works that way with us all the time. Attorneys try to get a bunch of attorneys. They don't always want to communicate. It might be email or whatever, but we've tried to figure out ways, and we're having to figure out ways that we've got to get our messages to them and get them to respond. And big part is pick up the phone. It's one of those old things that still works. And, we're some of us old geezers, we still like to use the phone rather than texting. So call us. We'll be happy to talk to you. So.
Well, Don, Diane, and Wayne, thank you so much for everything that you brought to this conversation. Wayne, were you going to say one more thing?
I was just going to quickly add that North Texas Community Foundation is a part of the glue that does that. I mean, this is just one example of the things that the Community Foundation does to connect the dots, to engage deeper conversations, to look at broad strategies for solutions. So I think, this community does collaborate well because we have leadership that sees the importance of that. So, and I was also going to remind Don, I think it's your turn to buy breakfast.
Well, thank you, Wayne, for that plug for the Community Foundation. And again, thank you for all of the work, the effort, the time and energy the three of you put into this issue and helping kids and families in our community. If you are interested in giving to any of these nonprofits from your fund at the foundation, feel free to reach out to our donor relations team if they can be of any support. And you should have their information. If not, just give us a call and we'll make sure you get connected to them. Rose, would you like to close us out?
Oh, just to say thank you all. What a privilege it is for our team. Well, for me to lead this great team, but also for all of our staff to be able to serve such a generous community of donors and connect them with these agency leaders that are, we couldn't be more proud of all your work. And we're here to serve you. So you let us know how we can help. Wayne, thanks for that shout out, but just let us know how we can improve our game because this community sure deserves it. So all the best to you. Happy Thanksgiving. We'll see you soon.
Thank you.